episode of the podcast. I'm really excited for our conversation today because we're talking about something that I haven't really delved into much here on the podcast, which I've been realizing is a little bit odd. Today, we're going to talk all about spiritual practices and one of my own personal spiritual practices. But the striking thing about it is that I think for many of you who are listening or tuning in, you likely have a spiritual practice, and it may be well-defined, very clear, very intentional for you, or it may not yet be articulated, but I would imagine it's there because something I appreciate about working and being an ambitious empath is that most of us have a connection and a real close connection with some sort of higher power, whether it's a connection with Christian faith or some origins, depending on how you were raised. I was raised Catholic. Whether you connect with Mother Earth and find your spirituality in nature, whether you believe in law of attraction and the quantum physics field, I just imagine that to some degree, you likely have a spiritual practice or belief system. And for me, if you've been here for a while now, you've likely heard me share before that one of the practices that supports me most in finding balance and peace as an empath and entrepreneur is actually the practice of Kundalini yoga. And during the pandemic, I became certified as a Kundalini yoga instructor back when I lived in Washington, D.C., and it was an incredibly transformational and deeply impactful practice. And for those of you who are not familiar with Kundalini yoga, Kundalini is a form of yoga that involves chanting, singing, breathing exercises, and lots of asanas and repetitive poses. But its purpose is to truly activate your Kundalini energy or your Shakti energy. It is a deeply spiritual practice. And for me, what Kundalini yoga has supported me most in developing is in developing my intuition and really connecting with my own meditation practice, which has just been so incredibly transformative and healing for me. And there's no one that I would want more to come on the show and be my first guest to talk about Kundalini yoga than one of my own Kundalini teachers, as well as one of my own spiritual teachers. And I'm thrilled to have Nandi Gabremedhin on the podcast today. Nandi is a female business creator. She's the owner of Afua's Baby LLC and a budding yoga brand, Nandi Yoga, based in Washington, D.C. And her work focuses on wellness, self-care, and spirituality, as well as honoring our ancestors through daily rituals. Something that I appreciate and adore about Nandi's work is we have a shared value and belief system around luscious, luxurious morning routines. And I love hearing Nandi talk about her morning routine. She is pure magic, and I really think the whole world needs to know her. So I'm thrilled to share her with you today on the podcast. It's her first podcast interview. Something I really appreciate about Nandi is that she's nothing short of transparent about all that she's overcome in her own life to get to where she is today as an entrepreneur, a yoga teacher, a practitioner, and an incredibly surrendered soul at that. I learned so much from Nandi in just recording this interview with her, and I'm so excited to share it with you today. Today, we're going to really jump into her story and what it was like for her doing so much of her life without her mom and how that impacted her career, her teaching, and making connections, how she learned to be surrendered in her teaching throughout her life, especially since a lot of it wasn't her own. We dig into the importance of having self-acceptance and love for yourself and why she chooses to live in gratitude. She shares an incredibly profound quote on the show that I really just want to read for you. She reminds us that she chooses to be more in the gratitude than in the despair. Gosh, I think that's just such a powerful concept. She shares what her self-care routine looks like as she honors her body and her soul and how she's able to show up consistently and what her journey was to Kundalini yoga and eventually becoming a yoga teacher. It's such a joyful episode, and I feel honored to have Nandi on the show today. And let's jump in. Hello and welcome to the Prosperous Empath Podcast, designed especially for empaths and highly sensitive entrepreneurs just like you who are committed to achieving holistic success. I'm your host, Catherine Wood, Master Certified Coach, author, mastermind leader, and founder of Unbounded Potential, a boutique coaching firm for empathic entrepreneurs. I'm on a mission to bring empathy back into the world of business. Each episode will focus on achieving more by doing less through leveraging empath-friendly leadership practices, boundaries, rituals, and systems, all the while continuing to care deeply about ourselves, others, and the world around us. If you are committed to joyful living and running a conscious business, but amassing wealth while doing so, proving that you can have both in a society that tells you you can't, then you are in the right place. Join me here each week to find out how. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review so you won't miss an episode. Plus, you'll find all the show notes and helpful resources over at unbounded-potential.com. Hello, Nandi. Welcome.
Hi, Kat. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited for you for this conversation, and I'm also just really excited for my audience to get to know you because I don't know if you know this, but I really relate to you as one of my spiritual teachers.
Oh, wow, Kat. Thank you so much.
And I feel like the whole world needs to know you because I just think you are magic. And I'm excited to have you on the podcast and share you with more of my world. So how's that for introduction?
Wow. I am so honored about that introduction. And it's good. Those are things that I need to hear because sometimes I keep my voice in here and I don't always present it. But sometimes there are opportunities that you probably have had. That's what makes you say that. People get a glimpse of the more that's hanging out inside. So I'm happy that you called on me to give me an opportunity to share some of that. So I give thanks. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Well, I would love to give you an opportunity to just share briefly about who you are. And I'd love to invite you to share your pronouns and a little bit of your story.
Okay. So my name is Nandi Gabremedhin, or Nandi Tunge Gabremedhin. My younger self wanted to hold on to my hyphenated name, and my older self is not so concerned with that anymore. So a lot of times I just kind of drop it and write it because it's a very long name. Pronouns, she, her, queen, goddess are some of the pronouns that I like to use. I am originally from New York and New Jersey, Teaneck, New Jersey, and moved to Washington, D.C. About 15, shortly after I lost my mom. She's right here behind me and on my chest. And I joined my sister in Washington, D.C., who was a new grad from Howard University. She was a young mom and wife. And I'm very grateful that my sister swept in to help support me because my father and I were struggling. He was in mourning and I was in mourning and just kind of all over the place. And my grandmother and my sister decided to take hold. And that really supported me getting to where I'm at right now. getting an opportunity to go to Duke Ellington School of the Arts. I was a dancer all my life and didn't really know what my plans were going to be. Didn't really envision me being a dancer. I guess was kind of floating, but especially when my mom transitioned and became our ancestor, I really had no idea what it was that I was going to do. But my sister sat me down and showed me a few applications for DC high schools, and Duke Ellington popped out. I was like, that seems like a cool place. And it really, really was. It was a great space for me to process my healing positively, like to go into the arts and to have positive people around me, artistic people around me, because in that time of mourning, it could have just been like total flip side. So Duke Ellington was a saving grace for me. I'm grateful to still be connected to that community. And I have 8, I will call them sisters, women that I'm still connected to, that we help support one another spiritually, socially, and business-wise. They're very smart women, and I'm grateful to have grown together, like women that I've known since I was about 15. Beyond that, I'm married. I have 4 children. I didn't finish university. I've been working and mothering and kind of figuring out life. I used to work for DC government, Board of Education. And then when I got pregnant with my 3rd child, I realized that staying at home was going to be more affordable and more nurturing. My husband agreed. So we both we drug ourselves into work. He literally worked like 80 hours a week. He was working 2 full-time jobs. We barely saw each other, and I was doing the full-time homework. And sometimes when I see other young families coming up, I get a glimpse and remember, all of the struggle that we had to go through. And nothing was perfect. Nothing is perfect, but I'm very grateful and proud of both of the foundations that my husband and I had, that we were able to come together and put a lot of positive emphasis on raising our children together, even though we're not always on the same page. But when it comes to them, we're pretty much on the same page. And that has been reflected. People have placed us on a pedestal. And I always say to people, don't get confused with Facebook, right? Like, don't get carried away with the imagery that you see, because it hasn't been easy. It's beautiful, and I'm super grateful, and we make things look great, and people are inspired by us. People make commentary. They want to be like us. And that's great, because it is not so common to see 2 young African Americans. I was 19. My husband was 24. We got pregnant like instantly. I was going to Howard University. He was going to PG. And we got pregnant like instantly. The right to choose, we didn't keep that child. And I got pregnant like 2 weeks after meeting him. Never been pregnant before. Obviously having unprotected sex. And then eventually got pregnant right after that. That was our oldest daughter. So we've been together since then. We've been married for 14 years. We've been together for 25 years, and we've done a lot of growing and learning. And it's a lot of growing pains when it comes to that, and we've been guiding ourselves. I haven't had the wisdom to go talk to my mom or my siblings, but they're older, but I didn't gain a lot of wisdom from them. I guess watching them allowed me to make choices to say what I do want and what I don't want. So I did learn from them. But the coaching that you might get from your mom, from your aunts, I didn't really have that, guiding me on my finances. Running a house, I had to do a lot of figuring out. And I am very grateful that the 12 years that I did get with my mother and in the nucleus of our home at the time was very powerful and impactful to help kind of guide me, to make a proper home, to create order in my house, to, sign my kids up for activities, to put them to bed on time, to read stories at night, to feed them good meals. Those are all the things that were taught to me, and the love and nurturing that I got when I was little that I just tried to recreate. And the things that have been missing for me, I do my best to show up for my children in the ways that I didn't have people show up for me, which in turn makes a healing. It creates a healing. It helps to just stop some trauma there in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, I think that these are some of the qualities that I appreciate about you most is the willingness to keep it real, to say it how it is. It must be your Jersey roots, your Jersey, New York roots. It's incredibly refreshing. And, we haven't even kind of talked about how I know you, which is really through the world of Kundalini yoga. When I was training for my Kundalini teacher certification, I guess you'd done it a couple of years prior, but you were just a sight to behold, whether you were teaching from the front of the room or up here on a mat next to me, like you just radiate wisdom and beauty. And I just think you're larger than life.
thank you, Dad. Well, I remember coming to one of your classes. You taught either a sadhana or something online, and I was very impressed. I was like, oh, she's a new teacher. I was like, this is great. I don't remember the details, but I remember being impacted by it. And then I remember asking Julie about you, and she was like, yeah, you don't know about Kat? She's an author. She's this. And I was like, oh, I need to know her. So I'm glad that we're here now. And I'm grateful for those experiences. And you saying that makes me think of, it's you never know who you're going to bump into and how things are going to unfold. But when you present yourself, right, I was thinking about two sisters that I know. I went to high school with one of them, but then then later on in life, my kids went to school with another sister. So they both know me, but they know me in two different ways, but they both respond to me the same way. So whatever impact that I was able to make on the older sister in high school was the same sort of impact in a different way on the other sister. And I just said, your reputation and how you show up is very impactful and it can be important and can draw things into your life or end things. You just never know what you're going to run into. So that made me think of that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's true, and like I think something I appreciate about you from the yoga mat is really like you share your journey with us. And when you're processing some strong emotions or, you've experienced a lot of loss in your life since I met you, and your willingness to let us be part of that grieving with you and that processing, I think it is truly an honor, and it takes so much inner work to be able to share so open-heartedly in a safe space like that. And so when I think about the fact that you didn't have that strong mentorship as a child, you lost your mother at a young age, you didn't feel like you had that those sisters to guide you. Like, how did you obtain such wisdom on life, such ability to be so surrendered in your teaching? Because it sounds like in large part you did it on your own. So what was that journey like?
Well, some of it I will say is a gift that lives inside me, but a lot of it is just watching and observing. So like I almost said I didn't really learn a lot from my siblings, but I did though. And from, and my dad too. I learned that I wanted to be a little different, or I saw the hardship that they went through. So I just wanted to find a place of forgiveness. I mean, we've been having these conversations. It's very powerful that I've been able to share with some of my siblings. And I'm the youngest. So my understanding of things, like the way it's just been explosive for me. How am I doing it? I want to answer your question and then share something. I don't know. It's just kind of a gift to observe and make these connections in a way. And it doesn't always happen at that time. It's like, I guess, having some experiences, seeing other people's experiences, and then going into these programs, like, taking the Kundalini teacher training has been extremely revealing for me. Authentic relationships. Oh my gosh, so revealing for me. And then recently, stress and vitality, even more. Like, I've been thinking about my place in my family, my siblings, the things that they went through, the things that I went through, and finding forgiveness and acceptance for all of them. Right. And I feel so happy about that because it has been, we've talked about relationships, about family, our siblings, and trauma points. And I want to answer your question, but and that this happens to me a lot. Your question makes me think about specific situations, but I don't really know how I'm able to do these things, but it's just like, I know I'm right. And then later on, there's a bigger reveal that's just like, yeah, you're in the right way. You're on the right path. So I've been in this self-acceptance phase, and I've also been celebrating myself. So I was mentioning the stress and vitality course. I had some more epiphanies, and I've been cheering on, because I'm very, very hard on myself, but I've been cheering on my younger self. Like, yeah, you were onto something. You did have some awareness. You might not have known how to apply everything. You might not have known how to articulate it all, but it's been there. And one of my early days in my 20s, we have our father was alcoholic, and now is still living. He's 87. He stopped drinking. I can't tell you when, but his alcohol addiction created dementia, so he still exists. We can have conversations, and he remembers who everybody is, but he goes inside these kind of like, I'm going to work tonight. Everybody knows he's not going to work. He's been retired for how many years, but it's just like, okay. So my father had an abusive personality, whether it was verbally, whether it was physically abusive at times. And that developed, of course, a stressful relationship for all of us. My brothers have a different relationship because they've got the longest standing relationship with him. My brothers are in their 60s. Then my sister came along, and then I came along. So we all had a chance to see and experience him. And my mother also created a space to try to protect us from that and protect herself. She did the best that she could. And I have opinions, no judgment. But again, learning from them and making a choice to be different, right? So in my 20s, I observed my siblings and me even getting into these things with our dad. And I just looked at my father and I took him down to a boy, right? I went in and I just took my father down to a boy, and I started to envision from what I know and from who I know my grandmother is. I don't know my grandfather. And just thinking about my father and the time period, he was born in 1937. He's a Black man in New York City trying to make a way. And I'm thinking about all of the struggles that compounded on my dad, not knowing his father, family struggles, how tough my grandmother is. She's really, really tough. My aunts are all tough. They're tough kind of people, loving, but tough kind of people. So I just thought about, trying to have compassion and empathy for my father, having to grow up in a space like that and become the man that he was. Also very proud of him because my father is egomaniac, but and he's the egomaniac, and he also is very headstrong. So my father and mother came into the Black Pan-African movement in Harlem, which was a very invigorating movement for Black Americans to be reconnected with Africa, the Caribbean, the diaspora, and begin to understand more than slavery. And that was a huge mission for my parents. They changed their names. They changed my brother's names. And then when my sister and I came along, we were given African names. And that is the way we lived our life. We lived our life in this conscious way. We couldn't have relax our hair. We couldn't use chemicals in our hair. We wore African clothes on picture day, and we got teased. We got all kind of things that we had to deal with. The kids called us African booty scratchers, and the kids made fun of our names, and they, talked about your hair, or I've had people talk about my complexion and all of these kind of things. But in my house, when I get home, my parents made sure to build us up. I think my father is very fair skinned. My mother is a little bit lighter than me, but they knew and they understood what Black children have to deal with when they go outside the home. So they did everything that they could to build us up and prepare us to give us the confidence. And that's why I am the way that I am. That's why I believe in myself and I carry myself with such reverence, because I had parents that built me up. But at the same time, with my dad, he was fighting an internal struggle, and I saw that. So when my sister and my brothers they would get into beefs with my father, I don't think that they were able to see that. And I tried to communicate that with them so that they can find some healing, because I know that everything that we've all been through has created resentment, very angry. And I understand those feelings are very valid, but to carry on for a lifetime, holding those feelings of resentment and anger and not being able to, I'm not saying that they're not grateful. So I just want to add that. But I think I choose to be more in the gratitude than the despair, because I also see the difference in my other family members and how things could have been a lot different, or other African-American families, and things could be a lot different. I don't know if you're going to understand this, but one of the greatest gifts that an African-American or anybody outside the continent is to understand your history, to understand who you are and have self-acceptance and love for yourself, because the world will beat you down. And if you don't have that, you're going to struggle. You're going to struggle just with, just in your appearance, like there's so many women that spend thousands of dollars on hair, unnatural ways to enhance themselves, skin lightening, and things like the Crown Act. I don't know if you're familiar with, there was a law that's passed in California first that allowed Black women to show up, or Black people to show up and not be harassed about their hair. I'm sure you might have heard Oprah Winfrey tell a story about how she showed up to be a newscaster in Baltimore, and they were like, oh no, that's not going to work. You need to relax your hair. She went to get a perm, lost all her hair. She ended up in a wig. So for Oprah Winfrey and many other Black women and men that had to go through coming into corporate America and having to put on a different face, that's a big deal. That is a big deal. So, doubling back to, the how, I didn't get a lot of information and foundation from my family, but that's my root is, building up the confidence to be. But then that's the physical part, right? But then you have the mental part, you have your intellect, that also has been a little bit of a challenge for me because of my upbringing, my certain learning disabilities that I had that my mother tried to support. And she did such an amazing job. I mean, my mom had like legal pads that she got from work. She worked in the math department. And I remember her writing down all the times tables. And she was like, okay, you have to go in your room and you have to do that. You have to read this passage. And I remember I was like the kid, like looking up in the sky, like that paint is chipping up there. Like, not. She come back in the room. Are you done? I'm like, yeah, I'm still over here working on it. That kind of thing. Like I was like wanting to be a creative, wanting to do artistic things. And I think that I can appreciate the very many teachers that are presenting these lessons in a more creative way today. They're using music. They're using, kids can get up from their seats and move around, and I could have benefited a lot more in my education had I had some of those teachers be more creative. And what I've learned that most Indigenous people are not learning in a classroom setting, right? Like back in the day, like people are they're learning in a different, more hands-on way on how to move through life. And it's almost like Montessori, right? Like, but in life, right? Because Montessori, where you learn how to clean the tables, right? It's like a community setting. But imagine that like villages or communities learning and teaching kids in this way.
Mm-hmm.
could have, when I think about that, could have been more of a support for me, but whatever, you know.
There's so much wisdom in what you just shared. So many gems. I'm like smiling over here because I think I've shared this with you before, that I just think you're a master storyteller. and I really want to highlight some of the pieces in which you shared, because the question I asked was really around self-acceptance. Like how have you gained so much access to this wisdom that you just embody in the face of a lot that I've known, that I've come to know about you since meeting you. Um, I hear, I've also experienced addiction and mental illness in my family. And I think something so refreshing hearing you talk about your experience is there's so much facility in just naming it and speaking it without judgment or hate, right? Like that ability to just accept it, and even to be able to laugh about your father and some of your experiences with him over the years. It speaks to the you and I were talking about this book, The Yamas and Niyamas, before we started recording, and just that idea of the yama of nonviolence, like really speaking from a nonviolent place. Which is the yama of ahimsa, which came up just this morning when I was on the yoga mat in your class. And I hear so much of that in how you speak about your experience. It's just from a really surrendered, honest place, which I think is a huge facet of, I think, what I so appreciate about you is you speak from a loving place about experiences that can be deeply painful or anger fueled for so many. And I'm really in awe of that quality about you. And I think there are some other qualities that I appreciate about you. And I know we share a passion for self-care and your morning practice and your morning sadhana. And I think that is, probably, I'm imagining, a huge component of what supports you in showing up the way you do. And, I would love for you to share with my audience what your self-care routine looks like. How do you really support your body in doing that internal work and self-honoring in order to show up so consistently in the way that I know you to be and to be.
Thanks. Yeah, self-care is a big deal for me, and at different levels in my life, it meant different things. And self-care, I remember a long time ago, was like, oh, get your pedicure, and what else? Maybe get a massage. And I remember I was not getting massages because it was not something that was in my budget. I just thought it was really expensive, or I don't know. I wanted a massage, but I just didn't get it. Now it's like, that's a part of my routine. So self-care. Well, relationships. I had a huge breakup. I like to call them breakups. I had some college girlfriends. I thought I would have friends, be with friends with them forever. And I ended up on the outside of the circle. I found out later, no real conversation, no formalities. And I was really hurt by that. And again, I chose something positive to create a healing. I was very resentful. I remember some of my feeling very petty and vengeful in my thinking. I would never hurt anybody, but I remember feeling really upset. So I decided to do teacher training. I talked to, I also simultaneously was working on my spirituality. I didn't grow up in a Christian home. Both my parents went to Catholic school, but because of their Black nationalism and their African consciousness, they felt that the way that Christianity was given to them was regurgitated through like this Eurocentric scope because Christianity has deep roots and original roots in Africa, but that's not the Christianity that's being practiced. So my family, they didn't go into the church. And then there's lots of African spirituality. I've never got a chance to have those conversations with my mother and father. Why they did not go full-fledged to practice African spirituality, because they did allow me to be blessed by Anana. Anana is a Akan Ghanaian priest who gave me my name, Akosua, which means born on Sunday. And my parents gave me the other names. My father named me Nandi because my dad's name is Shaka, and my father has affinity for the Shaka Zulu story. Nandi was Shaka's mother, and my father gave me that name. So coming into the religion, I've been searching all my life, just trying to figure out what my path was. Had an opportunity to go to church with some family members, and I remember thinking, should we be going to church? I don't know if, I'm like, okay. Then I had my daughter and I was like, I've got to do something. I felt like I have to be responsible. I've got to create some spirit in her life. So we started going to church. My husband wasn't interested and I used to take her to church. And it was good for a while until I got very offended by the pastor making statements about Islamic people. And I was like, oh no, I'm not Muslim. And I might have opinions, but nobody gets on a pulpit. And who does that? So I was just like, nope, we left. So all of this time passed. And what did I mostly do for my children? Like I was raised, we bless our food, we say our prayers, before we go to bed. But that was like it. It was not a big ritual. And I had been searching. I was like, I want something. I want some sort of spirituality. So I reached out to my sister, my ex-sister-in-law, who is a priestess of Santeria, Voodoo. There's a lot of different names. Kundumble, there's a lot of different names. And these are African spirituality practices that are practiced in the Caribbean, through South America, and they originate in Africa. So I talked to her about it because I had been interested, and had I done it yet? I had already gone to Cuba, and that's my business. Afua's baby was born out of my trip in Cuba. And I had a reading. I had a very, very powerful reading. I can't believe it. Like, I can't share everything with you, but it was so profound to the point that, and it was not a lot of stuff going on, but it was so profound to the point that I was energetically depleted. And I remember I couldn't even hold my head up when I left. I didn't feel sick, but I just felt like this energy on me. And that pushed me to begin my business. So let's bring it back forward, the breakup with the friends, wanting to work on my spirit. And my sister-in-law said, you should look up Kundalini. Go and check out the Kundalini. She said, stay away from the trendy yoga. And I was like, okay. And when you say that phrase, anything can be trendy. Any Kundalini can be trendy, Hatha, right? Yoga period is just trendy right now, right? And that was her language. And I was just like, okay. So that made me say, like, for anybody that knows music, or if you know about hip hop, that makes me think of like, don't be listening to that new stuff. Get into the roots, right? The authentic stuff. So I'm like, okay. So I Googled Kundalini, saw a few things. I went to YouTube. I took a few classes, and I was very like looking for like Indian teachers, right? And I wasn't finding like a lot of stuff. I was looking for like real authentic. And I came across, I don't remember her name. It was one Indian woman. She has her hair cut. It was a really beautiful video. And I did the practice a couple times. And I was like, all right, let me look for a teacher training. Because I wanted to learn how to meditate. I didn't sign up to be a teacher. I was like, I feel like I can get to my spirit through meditation. Mm-hmm. I can know myself through meditation, but I don't know how to do it. So I started meditating on my own. I was just sitting and I was breathing, and I was using my own personal mantra that I started for myself, be your own peace. And I just began to like inhale what I wanted to take in and exhale what I wanted to release, like resentment, angry, like, I still have some of that. I'm like, why is this still there? But I was like,
it's called sacred rage, Nandi. The way you express it, it's sacred rage.
I will take that. I was like, okay, I Googled teacher trainings and Lighthouse came up and I was like, oh, that's so far. I want it to be in my neighborhood. And it's not even that far. But I was like, I don't want to go out of my neighborhood. I just want to walk there. So it took me some time and I decided I would go to the intro. And I went up and I was like sitting in the circle. I was like, let me see if I want to practice with these people for like a year. I need to see what it's like. I need to meet them. So I went into the studio and everything was cool, except it was freezing in there. And I was like, I asked Julie, I was like, is it always this cold in here? Because I don't think I'm gonna be able to meditate in the I was like, I can't be cold. I'm not feeling that. So she was like, are you cold? She was like, let me turn the heat on. So she turned the heat on. And I thought about it. And I was like, girl, you should jump on in. So Julie is amazing. She helped me make a payment plan. I was grinding in the restaurant. And I remember her saying I would go in there like a drug dealer with a stack of money and give it to her. And she was like, this is so cool. I just think it's so cool. Like, you're working hard. Like, she could see my dollars like in her hand. And that was a cool thing. I was just dropping off my money to all these ones, all of this money to pay for teacher training. Mm-hmm. And man, the Kundalini, like that's what they call it. Kundalini is the yoga of awareness, the awakening. And that it did. I began to create, it began to open up so many discoveries about myself, how I related to other people, the whys, what I needed. And I think shortly after that, I also did some therapy. But a lot of this stuff has been just reaffirming for me, right? That I did have those ideas or creating an understanding for myself. And that was a major shift for my self-care. That is the question that you asked me. So I'm getting to the self-care now, is that I know we have to end shortly. That was the start of my radical self-care in a different way outside of, the physical, going into my practice. And I was not always a morning person. I was not like kind of a morning person, but never going to get up out of my bed at 4:00 in the morning to do any practices. And a lot of things just began to resonate with me. Non-stealing. I'd say Atia. I forget that one.
Oh, let's see.
The non-stealing. Well, that's truth telling, I think Satya, right? Is truth for the truth. And I forget what.
Asteya is non-stealing.
Non-stealing. Yeah. And Julie would, because I had issues with being late and I was coming from, Northeast going uptown, and she would call us out about being late. And she was just like, you can't steal people's time. Like, if you're going to be a teacher, you have to show up, you have to end your class. And that really resonated with me. Mm-hmm. Because there's a term in the Black community, CP time, color, we always show up after. Or African people, they're even, oh my gosh, like that's why their weddings start at 1 a.m.
Nandi, my husband's Indian. There's a thing called IST, Indian Standard Time, or EST, Eastern Standard Time. I feel you. I get you.
So I had to make an adjustment, and that was very powerful for me. And I hold people to that. If people say they're going to start at a certain time, I'm like, you gotta be there. And sometimes you got to have patience, but yes. So those were things that just started to mold me in a different way, really positive, about the timing, how I'm showing up. And I loved it. I just couldn't get away from Sunrise. I got myself a membership and I was in class. I was taking 5, classes a week, as many as I could, or whatever classes were on the schedule. I tried to show up for them. And I was very happy about having something that was healing for me and something that took my mind away from how hurt I was. I mean, even through the practice, I cried so many tears. I had to stop following people on social media just to protect myself. And it took me a long road to get to even the self-care that I'm on now, because I added another layer. I added Sacred Woman, which is Queen Afua's program. She has this beautiful woman's Bible that she's an African-American woman. And it started out in this African-American community because a lot of Black women and still are dying in childbirth or dying after childbirth. So she created this Bible to help with womb health. And all kind of women are onto her now. I mean, when I went to Sacred Woman Africa, there was a Caucasian woman that joined the trip. And I know that must have been really hard for her to be in a company of 62 African-American women. So I kudos to her, and I was very proud of that experience for her. But anyway, I added that layer, and that syncing with my Kundalini practice created this mega sadhana that I did in 2020. And it was easy to do because nobody was doing anything, right? So it was easy for me to delve myself yet again into something positive rather than just Netflix, eating, sleeping, not being productive. So go ahead.
I'm just mindful of the time. And honestly, I feel like maybe we need to schedule a part 2 of this conversation.
I would love it.
I do want to just speak on a couple of these. I want to highlight a couple of the pieces because the question I asked you was around self-care. And what I'm hearing is for you, self-care is spiritual. Your self-care is a spiritual practice. They are absolutely interdependent. They are one and the same. And I hear that bringing the reverence and the spirituality into your self-care, it deepens the practice for you. It allows it to be a radical self-love practice. I imagine it allows you to stay more committed to it. I mean, I know for me, Kundalini really supported me in connecting with my intuition. We just recorded a whole podcast episode with an expert on intuition, and Kundalini was absolutely the portal for me in creating that mental space in my meditation practice to help me connect with my intuition. And so I just love that reminder that for you and for any of us, for any of our listeners who are wanting to deepen a self-care practice, it's a spiritual practice. It's a practice of connecting with spirit, with God, higher power, whatever word you use, and allowing it to ground you, to guide you. So I'm not going to lie. I wanted to talk so much about some themes of race because, there have been so many deaths of Black brothers and sisters over the past couple of years. And I see you teaching classes in a room full of white appearing students and you as our Black teacher. And I just, I wanted to talk about this with you, and we may need to have a second conversation, but in our last couple of minutes, I really want to give you an opportunity to share with my audience, where they can find you. I want to share you with the world. So I would like for you to share how people can have a closer experience working with you like I have, and where you'd encourage they start.
Okay. Well, first you can find me at Lighthouse Yoga Center, DC. I'm teaching 3 sunrise classes a week and offering workshops. Outside of that, I am I'm using my social media platforms right now to appeal to people and create other relationships while I'm still working on my website. But those are the best ways to contact me for yoga offerings. And then also on the other platform, I have a fuisbaby.com that has lots of self-care items. And also too, that business is about inspiring people to remember their ancestors and radical self-care as we honor our ancestors. So they kind of go, I also merged those businesses a couple months ago with some of the products and meditation. So there's a lot of cool stuff happening there. So fuisbaby.com or Lighthouse Yoga Center for yoga classes for now.
Beautiful. We're going to schedule a second part of this conversation.
I would love that.
I will, I'll just leave you here with my final question, which I ask all my guests, which is, what do you think has made the biggest difference for you in becoming a prosperous empath?
Intuition, self-reflection, right? And sometimes you can't get caught up in a self-reflection. You can't continue to reflect, or you'll never move forward. But taking a moment to just self-reflect, find out, how things could be different, or what you want more of has helped me a great deal. And I always suggest that for anyone that's trying to pick up the pieces, anyone that's trying to figure out anything, just take a moment, a pause, right? And just reflect on yourself and the other and others, or whatever the situation is, and respond. Don't react.
Nandi, thank you so much. You are such a joy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kat. I'm looking forward to part 2. Have a beautiful afternoon, and I'll see you Wednesday, maybe, or Thursday for a sunrise.
Yes. And listeners, come join us at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Peace and blessings. Thank you all so much. Have a good afternoon, Kat.
Thanks, Nandi.
Thank you so much for listening today to this episode of the Prosperous Empath Podcast with me, Catherine Wood. Make sure you subscribe and leave a review so you don't miss an episode, and so more empaths just like you and me can find the show. As a thank you, each month, one lucky reviewer will receive a 60-minute coaching session with a member of our Unbounded Potential team. You can find all the show notes and bonus resources over at unbounded-potential.com. Thank you so much for listening and locking arms with me to bring empathy and prosperity back into the world of business.